That whisper, cold and sharp as steel, cut through the sound of clinking glasses and laughter at my 70th birthday party. Jessica was standing right beside me, her lips curling ever so slightly, her eyes steady, fearless. Just one sentence. Yet I could feel an entire lifetime of fatherhood burning to ashes inside me. In that moment, everything went silent. No music, no chatter from my son across the room. Only one sound remained, the heartbeat of a man who had just lost the most sacred thing in his life. I turned to the family portrait on the wall, me, Michael, and Jessica holding hands, and asked myself, if I'm not his real father, then what were these 40 years? A lie? An illusion I clung to just to survive? I smiled, but my hands trembled uncontrollably. Jessica's words were like a spark, tiny, but enough to ignite the fiercest war of my life. A war where blood ties were tested by fire, and the truth cut deeper than any wound ever could. Stay with me. Because what I discovered after that night shattered my heart even more than losing my wife. And you'll understand, sometimes the thing we call truth isn't light at all. It's the fire that burns your soul to the ground. I was born and raised in the southern part of Texas, where the summers burned so hot the metal in the workshop glowed brighter than the sunset. At 20, I was a welder in a truck frame factory. When the others went home after their shifts, I stayed behind a few extra hours, just to earn enough money to buy milk for my wife. Martha, my wife, was the only light in that rough, dusty life. She taught music at the local high school, her voice so warm that every time she sang, it felt like the whole room lit up with her. But that light didn't last long. She died in a car accident when Michael was barely 6 months old. I remember that night like a scar carved in my mind, the phone ringing through the storm, the doctor's hoarse voice on the line, and the empty living room where her sweater still hung on the chair, waiting to be folded. Half of me died that night. The half that remained lived only for my son. Every night, when the neighborhood fell quiet, I'd sit by his old wooden crib and sing the blues songs Martha used to love. I didn't have her voice, but I had her heart. Hush now, little boy. Daddy's here. Don't you cry. There were nights I sang while crying, my tears falling onto his blanket, blending with the sound of wind scraping the windows. Those were the years I was too poor to buy new clothes for my son, but I was richer than anyone, because I still had him. Michael grew up strong and bright. He had his mother's eyes, deep and shining, and a smile that melted every ounce of exhaustion in me. I worked myself to the bone for 20 years just to give him a shot at college, at a life bigger than mine could ever be. When he finally graduated, I thought, maybe now I can rest. But life never lets you rest that easy. At 30, Michael brought home Jessica, a beautiful, confident young woman. The moment she shook my hand, I felt a chill. Her smile was polite, perfect, but her eyes were cold. She looked at me the way you'd look at a business acquaintance, not a father-in-law. I told myself it was just nerves. I tried to make her feel at home. I cooked dinner, shared old stories, even told her about Martha. But her smile never softened. It stayed thin, sharp, like a blade hidden behind her lips. I didn't know why, but from the very first moment I felt it deep down. I was standing in front of someone who didn't believe in family. In the years that followed, I lived in a small house on the edge of town, just a few blocks from Michael's place. I never wanted to intrude on their lives, but what father can stand by and watch his own son drift away, turning into a stranger? Jessica rarely let Michael visit me. Every time I called, she had an excuse ready. He's tied up with a project, Arthur. I'm sure you understand. I did understand, or at least I tried to. I'd always believed that once a son starts his own family, a father should step back and give him space. But something about it all felt wrong. Jessica looked at me like I was a piece of the past she couldn't wait to erase. Bit by bit, she changed everything about him. The food he liked, the way he spoke, even how he mentioned me. Every trace of our bond, she polished out like a stain she couldn't stand to see. One autumn evening, Michael stopped by with a bottle of wine. We sat out on the porch, listening to the hum of crickets mixing with the wind. I looked at him, really looked, and saw hesitation flicker in his eyes. Michael, I asked quietly, have you ever wondered if I might not be your real father? He froze, caught off guard, then broke into a smile, the same genuine smile he had as a boy. Dad, he said, you're the only father I've ever had. No one could replace you. I chuckled softly, though my throat felt tight. His words warmed me like a cup of tea on a cold night. But when I looked closer, I saw something. Just a flash, a hesitation, like a hairline crack across a perfect pane of glass. That night, after he left, I sat there for a long time. The clock on the wall ticked slow and steady, echoing through the empty house. I walked to the old wooden chest where I kept Martha's things, some faded photos, her silver necklace, and Michael's yellowed birth certificate. My name was still there, clear as ever, Arthur Hayes, father. But just below it, there was a faint line, something written once and erased. I'd never noticed it before. The lamplight caught on the faded ink and a chill ran through me. A thought, dark and sharp, cut its way into my mind. Jessica didn't just want to control my son. She wanted to erase me from his life entirely. I couldn't have known then that only a few weeks later, her whisper at that birthday party would ignite a wildfire of suspicion and revenge and burn down everything I once believed was family. It started small, as all tragedies do. A careless word, a fleeting glance that lingered just a little too long. And from there, the seed of doubt began to grow. After that birthday party, Jessica seemed to change. Subtly, dangerously. She was still polite, still smiled, still played the part of the perfect daughter-in-law. But something in her smile was wrong. Behind every word, every gesture, I could feel her watching me, waiting for the moment I'd break. A week later, I dropped by Michael's house to bring him some stew, the kind he'd loved since he was a boy. Jessica opened the door, surprised to see me. The house was unusually quiet. "Where's Michael?" I asked. "He's away on a business trip," she said smoothly. "Didn't he tell you?" Her tone was soft, but each word cut like a blade. Michael hadn't mentioned anything. I set the bag of food on the kitchen counter and turned to leave, but Jessica called out, "Mr. Hayes?" I was cleaning out some of Michael's mother's old things, and I found something strange. She placed an old, yellowed envelope on the table. I opened it. Inside was a copy of Michael's birth certificate. The name of the father had been erased, scrubbed out, then rewritten. I froze. My hands trembled. "Where did you find this?" "In one of her boxes," she said. "Probably just a clerical mistake." Her voice was calm, too calm. Her eyes, though, they carried intent. That night I drove home through the rain, unable to sleep. I pulled out my own copy of the birth certificate, the one I'd kept all these years, and compared the two. The handwriting was different. My name, Arthur Hayes, was bold and clean on the original. On Jessica's copy it looked faded, shaky, as if someone had traced over it. But why? The next day, Michael came by. I tried to act normal, but my eyes couldn't leave his face. He looked so much like Martha, her smile, her nose, yet deep in his eyes there was something not entirely hers. "Dad, are you okay? You look tired," he said. "I'm fine, son, just thinking about your mother." I lied, but Jessica wasn't lying. Not anymore. She began whispering poison into Michael's ear, carefully, strategically. "Don't you ever feel different from him? You're quiet, distant. He's not like that. Isn't it strange that there are no baby pictures of you? Maybe your mother was hiding something." At first, Michael laughed it off. But soon, I saw it. The hesitation when he called me Dad, the silence that lingered between us where laughter used to be. Then one evening, I came home and found Martha's old bedroom door wide open. The box I'd kept her keepsakes in, the one I'd never let anyone touch, had been ransacked. Scattered across the floor were old photos, a silver chain, and a folded letter I hadn't read in decades. Martha's letter, written before Michael was born. "If anything ever happens to me, tell our child he's the most precious thing we ever had, even if he came to us in a way we didn't expect." I stopped reading. My chest went cold. Even if he came to us in a way we didn't expect. What did that mean? And more importantly, how did anyone else know this letter even existed? Behind me, the door creaked shut, slowly, almost tenderly. Then from the hallway I heard it. Soft, deliberate footsteps fading into the dark. Jessica. 3 days later, the phone rang. Michael's voice was dry, flat. "Dad, we need to talk." We met at a small coffee shop near my old factory. He arrived 10 minutes late, crisp white shirt, not a wrinkle on it, like he was heading into a meeting, not meeting his father. I already knew what was coming. He placed an envelope on the table. Inside was a single sheet of paper, freshly printed. DNA test results. I stared at it, silent. Jessica said she just wanted to be sure, he muttered. She didn't mean any disrespect. No disrespect? I laughed hoarsely. Tell me, son, what could be more insulting than doubting the man who raised you for 40 years? Michael lowered his eyes, unable to look at me. I just need to know the truth. Maybe Mom hid something from us. The truth. He said it like a blade to my chest, as if I had been the one living a lie. I remembered that rainy night, Jessica's cold stare as she handed me that forged birth certificate. Now it all made sense. She was rewriting reality step by step, replacing every memory, every bond I'd built with him. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. Think about it, Michael. I worked nights for decades so you could go to college. I've never kept a secret from you. I know, Dad, but Jessica said maybe there was a mix-up with the papers. I didn't want to believe her, but you did it anyway. Silence. Only the faint clink of a spoon against his cup. I looked at him and saw something breaking behind his eyes. Not just doubt, but fear. Quietly, I asked, "If the results say I'm not your father, what will you do?" He hesitated. I don't know." That answer hurt worse than the test itself. It wasn't Jessica who cut me this time. It was my own son. That night, I drove home in the dark. The little house felt farther away than ever. I turned on the old radio. Martha's favorite blues song played softly, but it didn't warm me like it used to. It sounded like a ghost mourning its own death. The next day, Jessica showed up at my door, impeccably dressed, sweet perfume so heavy it made the air hard to breathe. "Mr. Hayes," she began with a calm smile, "I think you should prepare yourself. If the results aren't what you expect, it might be best for you to keep some distance, for Michael's sake." I stared at her. "You're asking me to walk out of my own son's life?" Her smile sharpened. "No, I'm just protecting my family." I looked into her eyes, cold, hollow, endless, like staring into a pit with no bottom. When she finally left, I noticed the envelope that had been sitting on my desk was gone. Inside had been hospital bills, records from the day Martha gave birth to Michael, the last tangible proof of that moment. I tore through drawers, searching, and then, in the bottom one, I found a scrap of paper, burned along the edges. Martha's name was half gone, scorched away by fire. That's when I understood. Jessica wasn't just trying to take my son, she was erasing me, piece by piece, from existence. I sank to the floor, clutching the charred paper, my heart heavy as stone. I'd always thought Martha's death was the worst pain a man could endure. But I was wrong. The real pain comes when you're still alive, and someone decides you no longer have the right to be a father. After that, Michael stopped coming around. My calls went unanswered, my texts unread. Every time I showed up at their house, Jessica answered the door. Her smile was polite, practiced. "He's in a meeting, Mr. Hayes. He'll call when he's free." The door closed in my face, cold, absolute. It wasn't Michael's home anymore. It was Jessica's dominion. A week later, an anonymous envelope arrived at my door. Inside was a photocopy of a hospital record dated 1982. The ink stamped a faded red across the page. In the middle, like a knife thrust, the line read, "Father, unknown." I sat there frozen. In the lower corner, a scrawl that looked like Martha's signature, but the handwriting was wrong, the ink odd, as if it had been copied from somewhere else. I raised the paper to my face and smelled it. There was a chemical tang, the kind that tells you something has been scrubbed or bleached. It was fake. I knew it the moment my eyes took it in. Jessica had become meticulous. She wasn't just planting seeds of doubt anymore. She was manufacturing evidence to make Michael believe the truth had been revealed. That night, after days of silence, Michael called once. His voice was flat, distant. "Dad, I think we should give each other some space. I need time to sort things out." "Sort out what, son?" I asked. "Everything." The line went dead. I sat at the kitchen table, 2 glasses in front of me, one for me, one for him, and realized I was talking to the past. The next morning I pushed harder. I drove to the hospital where Martha had given birth 40 years earlier. The records were old and yellowing, but the archivist, an older woman who remembered me, dug through the stacks and brought out a dusty box. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were the original documents, the seal still crisp. Father, Arthur Hayes. There was no unknown, no clerical error, no omission. Only one truth. Someone had falsified the records. I asked the archivist for a certified copy and left with it folded in my pocket. As I stepped out into the sunlight, I saw a silver sedan parked across the street. Jessica sat behind the wheel, sunglasses hiding half her face, phone in hand. She looked up, the corner of her mouth twitching into a small, victorious smile. I did not go to her. I stood there and met that smile across the distance between our lives. Me, the old lonely father. Her, the calculated woman who'd made war on our family. Between us hung a silence heavy as a declaration of battle. That night I began writing everything down. Dates, times, the words she said, the documents I'd collected. I knew I needed a record. Not for revenge, but to protect the truth. If I stayed silent, I'd lose everything. If I spoke up, I'd be up against a woman clever enough to turn lies into proof and turn a father into an imposter. I didn't know if I could win, but I knew one thing with a clarity that steadied me. My truth wasn't ink on a page. It lived in the years I had raised my son. I picked up the small photograph on the table, a picture of Michael at 10, fishing by the lake, me beside him. I could still hear him shouting from that summer, "Dad, I got one!" His laugh mixed with the slap of water, clear and honest, like the last bright summer of my life. I breathed deep and spoke to the empty room, a promise half to myself, half to the boy in the photo. If she wants a fight, Jessica, I won't hide anymore. I started living like a man being hunted, only this time I wasn't running. Instead, I watched, I listened, I documented. Every morning, I wrote down everything, every message, every encounter with Jessica, every strange flicker in Michael's behavior. I even hid a small camera in my study, aimed directly at the cabinet where I kept the certified copy of the real hospital record. I knew Jessica would come back. People like her never stop until they own everything. 2 weeks later, a message came from Michael. "Dad, I'm sorry, but Jessica wants to review some of Mom's old papers. Could you bring them over to the house?" I almost laughed. The excuse was perfect, just neat enough to lure me out of the house. But I didn't take the bait. I told him yes, pretended to leave, drove down the street, circled back, and parked quietly outside, engine off. Half an hour later, a figure appeared at my front door, Jessica. She used a spare key, Michael's no doubt, and slipped inside. My hands clenched the steering wheel. My pulse hammered in my ears. Through the window, I watched her head straight to the study, open the cabinet, and start rifling through the folders. A few minutes later, a flicker of orange glowed from inside. Fire. She was burning something, right there, in my home. I wanted to burst in, to stop her, but I forced myself to stay. Anger wouldn't save me now. Proof would. When she finally left, I went inside. The air was thick with smoke, the floor scattered with ash. My records, 40 years of proof, reduced to dust. Hands shaking, I plugged the USB from the hidden camera into my computer. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Jessica smiling as she tossed the papers into the flames. Then, just before she left, she turned toward the lens and smiled, right into the camera, as if she knew. That smile froze me colder than the fire ever could. I printed the frames, slid them into an envelope, and labeled it June 12th, Evidence of Document Destruction. Then I locked it away in a bank safe, somewhere she could never reach. That night I called Michael. "Son, we need to talk. Come by tomorrow, just the two of us." He hesitated. "Okay." The next morning he arrived. I showed him the footage, his face drained of color. He stared, lips trembling. "No, that's impossible. Jessica would never." "Look closer," I said softly. "This is the woman you've been defending." He sank into the chair, buried his face in his hands. I felt no triumph, no relief, only the hollow ache of a father forced to prove his innocence to his own child. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Son, I don't need you to take sides. I just need you not to let the truth be buried." He didn't answer. He only nodded, barely, but enough. And in that faint motion, I saw it. The spark of someone waking up from a long, cruel dream. When he left, I knew the real war was about to begin. Jessica wouldn't back down. She'd strike again, harder. And this time, I wasn't just fighting for my name, I was fighting for my son's soul. I turned toward the window. The night wind whispered through the torn curtain. Somewhere in the distance, a blues tune floated through the air, soft, mournful, familiar. Martha's voice seemed to ride on the breeze. Arthur, don't let them erase what we lived for. I whispered back, almost to myself, I promise. I won't let anyone bury the truth. The streetlights flickered outside, their glow catching on the photo frame of Michael as a child. Those same bright eyes, full of trust and wonder, stared back at me. And in that gaze, I found my reason, the only reason I had left, to step into the first round of the coming battle, where justice would finally have its say. That year's family gathering was held at Michael's house. I was invited, or rather, Jessica had to invite me. After everything that had happened, she couldn't come up with another excuse once Michael started asking questions. The house was lit bright and warm, filled with the scent of grilled meat and wine, but behind every smile lurked a quiet storm. I walked in carrying a thick envelope tucked neatly inside my coat pocket. Inside it, the hospital's original record, and a copy of the video from my hidden camera. Jessica stepped out of the kitchen in a crimson dress, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Mr. Hayes," she said sweetly, "please sit. I hope tonight we can put all our misunderstandings behind us." I smiled back, but it wasn't the smile of a kind old father anymore. "Thank you, Jessica. That's exactly what I came here to do." Dinner began. Laughter filled the room, but none of us, the three at the center of it all, Jessica, Michael, and I, actually touched our food. Between us, silence stretched thick and tense, like glass about to shatter. After the main course, I stood up and raised my glass. "Thank you all for being here. I just want to say a few words to clear up some things within the family." The chatter died instantly. Jessica's brow arched, her tone cautious. "Mr. Hayes, I don't think this is the right time." "Oh, it is," I interrupted, calm but firm, "because this might be the last time I get to call Michael my son in front of everyone." The table fell dead silent. Michael looked up, confusion and dread mixing in his eyes. "Dad, what are you talking about?" I reached into my coat and set the envelope on the table, my voice slow, cold, deliberate. "These are the original hospital records, where your mother gave birth to you in 1982. And this," I lifted another sheet, "is the fake copy someone sent you, where the word father was changed to unknown." Then I looked straight at Jessica. "You know who I'm talking about." The room went still. Relatives exchanged uneasy glances. The clinking of glasses ceased. Jessica's smile held for a moment longer, then faltered at the edges. "Are you accusing me of falsifying documents, Mr. Hayes? Do you have any proof?" I let out a quiet laugh. "You burned it. But fortunately, my camera didn't." The murmurs erupted, soft gasps, whispers spreading across the table like fire. Michael turned to her, voice trembling. "Jessica, tell me that's not true." She faced him calmly, eyes cold as marble. "Can't you see what he's doing, Michael? He's making this up because he can't stand that you trust me more than him." "You're wrong," I said, my tone dropping low, almost a whisper. "I'm not jealous. I'm just sorry. Sorry I ever believed you loved my son for real." Her hand tightened around her wineglass until her knuckles whitened. "And who do you think they'll believe? An old man stuck in his past? Or me, the woman standing beside his son?" I looked around the table, faces frozen between doubt and sympathy, and spoke clearly, each word like the strike of a hammer. "I don't need anyone to believe me. I just need the truth spoken aloud before you bury it. And if I have to, that video will go straight to court." The room shook with silence, heavy as thunder. Jessica's face went pale. Michael shot to his feet, shouting, "Enough, both of you! Stop it!" But it was too late. The dining room was no longer a place for family. It had become an arena, where lies and truth had finally met, face to face. The air in that room grew thick as smoke. No one spoke. Only Michael's unsteady breathing and Jessica's icy stare filled the silence. She set her wineglass down slowly, dabbed her lips with a napkin, and said in a voice so calm it chilled the room, "So, you want to talk about the truth, Arthur? Fine, let's tell all of it. Do you have the courage to tell everyone what Martha did before Michael was born?" I froze. My lips trembled before I could even speak. Jessica smiled, the smile of someone holding a knife behind her back. Martha once donated her eggs to a woman who couldn't have children. The implantation failed, or at least that's what everyone thought. But what if, during her own delivery, there wasn't just one child carrying your blood, but another that didn't belong to you at all? The whispers around the table broke out like wildfire. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. The air vanished from the room. Michael turned toward me, his face pale as paper. "Dad, is that true?" I shook my head, my throat tightening. I I don't know, son. Your mother never... Because she hid it from you, Jessica cut in, her voice triumphant. "Arthur Hayes, you've been living in a fantasy for 40 years, never realizing your wife might have switched your child." The sharp crack of glass echoed. Someone's wine glass had shattered. A relative started to stand, but I raised a hand. "No, let her finish." Jessica stepped closer, her voice dropping to a blade's edge. "Are you sure Michael is your son, old man? Or is he the child of someone else, the man Martha really loved?" Her words sliced through me. My chest pounded, my mind spun. Memories of Martha, her laugh, her eyes, those quiet afternoons when we sang by the window, flashed before me, now torn apart by Jessica's cruelty. Michael stood between us, eyes wild with confusion. "I don't know who to believe anymore," he whispered. "You or Jessica." I looked at him, my boy, the same child who once scraped his knee and cried into my arms, and saw how far doubt had pulled him from me. Slowly, I stepped forward and laid a trembling hand on his shoulder. "Michael," I said softly, "I don't have proof of your mother's love for me, but I have you, and that's the only proof I'll ever need." The room went utterly still. A single tear rolled down Michael's cheek. Jessica faltered for a moment, just a heartbeat, but her mask returned, cold and polished. "Touching, Arthur," she said, her tone sharp again, "but love doesn't change the facts." I met her gaze, and something inside me shifted. The anger was gone. What replaced it was steel, quiet, unyielding, the kind that comes from surviving too much pain to still be afraid. I reached into my pocket and took out a faded letter, the one Martha wrote before Michael was born. Her handwriting trembled across the yellowed paper. "If anything ever happens to me, tell our child he's the most precious thing we ever had, even if he came to us in a way we didn't expect." I read the words aloud, my voice breaking but steady. "These aren't the words of a liar, Jessica. They're the words of a mother who loved her son more than her own life." The room fell silent again. Jessica stepped back, lips pressed tight. Michael stared at me, then at the letter, his eyes softening, the cracks of doubt beginning to fade, replaced by something fragile but real: belief. I drew a slow breath and looked around the table. "You can twist the past, Jessica," I said quietly, "but you can't change one simple truth. I've been Michael's father all his life." Jessica stood frozen for a few seconds, then burst out laughing. It wasn't joy. It was sharp, metallic, the kind of laugh that makes your skin crawl. "Well done, Mr. Hayes," she sneered. "You're just like every sentimental old American in those black and white movies, thinking a few dramatic words can erase a lifetime of lies." Her tone hardened, her eyes flashing with something unhinged. "You don't understand. I did all of this for Michael. He deserves the truth. He needs to be free from the shadow of a man who isn't even his father." Michael clenched his fists. "Jessica, that's enough." "No! You have to listen!" she shouted, tears streaming down her cheeks, her voice breaking between fury and fear. "You don't know how long he's deceived you. I have proof. Everything's in the files I sent you." I tilted my head slightly, letting the words hang in the air. "You said, 'I sent you.'" Jessica blinked, the realization dawning too late. The room went deathly still. I I meant I found them," she stammered. "No," I said quietly, stepping closer. My voice dropped low, each word landing like the strike of a hammer. "You said you sent them, which means you are the one who forged the hospital records. You created the lie, and now you've just confessed." Gasps rippled around the table. Jessica's face turned pale. Before she could respond, Michael shot to his feet, rage and disbelief flashing across his face. "My God, Jessica, what have you done?" "You don't understand," she cried. "I only wanted you to have a better life, to be free from him." "From him?" Michael shouted, voice cracking. "From my father? The man who worked his whole life to raise me, who loved me when there was no one else? And you call that a burden?" Jessica stumbled back, her hands trembling. The glass in her grip slipped and shattered on the floor with a sharp, violent crash. "You don't get it," she screamed. "If he wasn't in the picture, you wouldn't have had to live with the guilt, the pity." "Enough!" Michael cut her off, his voice raw, tears in his eyes. He turned toward me. "Dad, I'm sorry. I doubted you. I was blind." I shook my head gently and put a hand on his shoulder. "You weren't blind, son. You were just caught in the game of someone who never understood what love really means." Jessica began to sob, but the sound no longer reached anyone. Relatives had already begun to stand, gathering their coats, leaving quietly, unwilling to witness the wreckage any longer. I faced her one last time. "I'm not going to sue you, Jessica, but I will turn that footage over to my lawyer. I need to protect my name and Michael's future." She looked up at me, her eyes burning with hatred and despair. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "No," I said calmly. "I never wanted to win. I just didn't want the truth buried under your lies." Her voice cracked into a scream. "You'll regret this. Both of you will." She spun around, heels striking the wooden floor like hammers, and stormed out. The door slammed shut, leaving only the echo and the smell of spilled wine in the air. Michael and I stood there, breathing hard, surrounded by silence. He sat down, his eyes red. "Dad, how do I even fix this?" I smiled faintly. "You don't have to fix anything, son. Just remember, love doesn't need a DNA test." We embraced as the spilled wine spread across the floor, glinting under the dim light. Outside, the night wind rose, whispering against the windows. And for the first time in months, the weight on my chest eased. Because in this battle, finally, I wasn't fighting alone anymore. I thought that night had closed the chapter for good. But I was wrong. Jessica didn't disappear. She simply retreated into the shadows to plan her next, crueler move. 3 weeks later, a thick brown envelope arrived in my mailbox, sealed with a bright red stamp. Notice of lawsuit. She was suing me for fraudulent paternal identity, financial exploitation, and interference in marital property. The words looked absurd on paper, absurd and venomous enough to make my hands shake. In the filing, Jessica listed everything: the savings account I'd opened for Michael, the small house I'd transferred to his name, even my retirement fund that I'd once asked him to co-sign. All of it, reframed as evidence of theft. Michael rushed over the moment he found out, his face pale with disbelief. "Dad, I swear I didn't know. Jessica, she did all this behind my back." I rested a hand on his shoulder. "I know, son, but this isn't a family argument anymore. This is a battlefield, and the enemy's playing by the rules of law." I went to see Franklin, an old black attorney who'd once been Martha's closest friend. He listened carefully, his brow furrowed deep, then exhaled. "Arthur, she knows exactly what she's doing. This is a smear suit, the kind meant to break you down, not win in court. But if she thinks you'll fold, she's picked the wrong man." I gave a tired smile. "Not this time, Frank." "Not anymore." Franklin began digging: bank statements, property transfers, timestamps from the video footage, hospital records. The deeper he looked, the darker it got. He uncovered a string of anonymous wire transfers to Michael's account over the past year, right when Jessica started turning him against me. The money came from a private law firm, owned by one of Jessica's old college friends. "She's been setting this up for a long time," Franklin said grimly. "This isn't family drama, Arthur. It's a full-blown setup." I sat there silent, listening to the ticking of the clock. Each second felt like a countdown, reminding me I'd gone too far to turn back. One afternoon, I went to the bank to withdraw some retirement money. The teller gave me a nervous smile. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes, but your account's been temporarily frozen. Court order." "What?" "It's an injunction filed by the plaintiff, Mrs. Jessica Hayes, until the matter is resolved." For a moment, I couldn't move. The world around me blurred. The stares of strangers burned into my back, the look they give a man they think is guilty. I, who had worked my whole life, who had built everything from sweat and patience, was now branded a thief. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen. Only the dull yellow light over the table kept me company, glowing over a cup of cold tea. Michael walked in quietly, sat across from me. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he whispered, "Dad, I don't even know what to say." I shook my head. "You don't need to say anything. Just don't give up." He looked up, eyes burning with shame and loyalty. "I won't. I'll do whatever you need me to. I nodded, and for the first time in weeks, something in me steadied. Good. Tomorrow, you're coming with me to Franklin's office. It's time we fought back. Outside, rain began to fall. Through the window, I watched the drops slide down the glass like old tears. I used to sing Ain't No Sunshine When She's Gone to Michael when he was a baby. Now I understood it differently. It's not only when someone leaves that the light fades, but when justice itself gets buried in the dark. Still, I would find a way to bring it back, even if I had to light it myself, with the trembling hands of an old man who refused to surrender. The Dallas County Courthouse was packed that morning. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, gleaming off the cold marble floor and catching on the tense faces of everyone inside. I sat quietly at the defendant's table, hands clasped, staring straight ahead. Jessica entered in a tailored black dress, walking beside a young man in a gray suit. His name was Coleman, her attorney. Sharp, confident, with the smug half-smile of someone who'd already written the ending in his head. Franklin leaned toward me and whispered, "Don't let his swagger shake you, Arthur. We've got the truth." And truth has a way of speaking for itself. The hearing began. Coleman rose smoothly, voice polished from rehearsal. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Jessica Hayes, has discovered that the defendant, Mr. Arthur Hayes, is not the biological father of her husband. Through years of deception, he fraudulently claimed paternal identity to seize control of assets, retirement funds, and family investments. We request the court to maintain the freeze on all related accounts to protect my client's lawful interests." His words sliced through the air like a formal execution. I sat still, silent. Then Franklin stood. His voice was steady, low, and full of quiet fire. "Your Honor, my client is not the fraud here. He's the victim. Victim of a calculated manipulation by the plaintiff, who fabricated documents, destroyed originals, and weaponized family trust for personal gain. And unlike the plaintiff, we have evidence." The room buzzed. Coleman smirked. "Evidence, counselor." Or just another emotional plea from an old man afraid to lose his money. Franklin gave a faint nod to the clerk. The lights dimmed slightly as a video appeared on the courtroom screen. It showed Jessica, inside my study, opening the cabinet, pulling out files, striking a match. The flames danced, and her smile flickered in the glow. When the video froze on her face, the entire courtroom went dead silent. Coleman tried to recover, his voice cracking just slightly. "This footage could easily be altered." "Authenticated by forensic analysis," Franklin cut in, his tone crisp. "Alongside this, we have verified bank statements showing Mrs. Hayes transferred funds to a private law firm the week before filing this suit, the same firm that distributed falsified documents to the press." I turned my head. Jessica sat motionless, jaw tight, color drained from her face. Coleman leaned in to whisper, but she didn't move. The judge flipped through the files, expression unreadable. Then, with a firm voice, "The court will suspend the asset freeze until both parties' evidence is fully reviewed. Additionally, the alleged destruction of legal documents, if proven, may constitute grounds for criminal prosecution." The gavel came down. Thud. The sound cracked through the room like thunder splitting the lies apart. Jessica shot to her feet, her voice shaking with fury. "He set me up. This whole thing was a trap." "Enough, Mrs. Hayes," the judge said sharply. "One more outburst and you'll be removed." Jessica fell silent, gripping her handbag until her knuckles turned white. She stormed toward the exit, but as she passed my table, she leaned close, whispering, "You think you've won? This is only round one." I didn't flinch. I met her gaze and murmured just loud enough for her to hear. "You're right, but the difference is I'm fighting for love. You're fighting for hate. And hate never wins." She froze for a second, eyes burning, then turned and vanished through the doors. Franklin placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder, his deep voice softening. "We cracked open the first window of light, Arthur. That's how justice begins." I looked up at the high dome of the courthouse. Through a narrow skylight, a beam of sunlight broke through the clouds and landed right where I sat. For the first time in months, I felt it, the faint, steady warmth of justice finding its way back. After the first hearing, I thought things might finally settle down, but Jessica wasn't the kind to surrender. She went silent for nearly 2 weeks, a deadly calm, the kind that comes right before a storm. One July morning, Franklin called. His voice was tight, urgent. Arthur, she's filed a new motion. This time, it's not about defamation. She's demanding financial compensation for emotional distress and reputational damage. And she's requested a temporary freeze on Michael's assets. I froze. Michael's? Yes. If the court approves, every cent in his accounts, even his company funds, will be locked. She's dragging you down by using your own son. I stood there in my quiet house, staring at an old family photo. It had all begun with a whisper, and now it had turned into a war between blood and bitterness. 3 days later, the hearing took place. Jessica walked in, calm and composed, like nothing had ever happened. Coleman was beside her again, clutching a thick stack of files. Your Honor, he began smoothly, my client, Mrs. Hayes, has suffered severe emotional and reputational harm, resulting in financial losses and mental anguish. We request that all assets belonging to Mr. Arthur Hayes and his son, Michael Hayes, be frozen until this matter is resolved. Franklin rose slowly. His voice was calm, deliberate, but every word cut clean. Your Honor, the plaintiff's true intention is not justice, but suffocation. Before the court considers this request, I'd like to submit a new piece of evidence we've just obtained. He handed a slim folder to the judge. This is a signed contract between Mrs. Hayes and a media firm, dated 10 days before she filed her first lawsuit. The stated objective? To disseminate negative content and influence public opinion regarding Arthur Hayes. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs, the sound of shock ricocheting off marble walls. Coleman lunged forward to grab the file, but the judge held it firm. This document bears Mrs. Hayes' signature, Franklin continued evenly. This isn't just a false lawsuit. It's a paid smear campaign. And worse, she used her husband's own bank account to fund it. Jessica's face went pale. That's fake. You forged that. All transactions verified by the bank, Franklin replied firmly. The confirmation order is included in the file. The judge examined the pages for a long moment, then spoke in a measured tone. The court denies the motion to freeze the defendant's assets. Furthermore, a separate inquiry will be opened into the plaintiff's actions, specifically for the deliberate spread of false information and abuse of legal procedures for personal gain. Thud. The gavel hit the desk. The sound echoed like a hammer cracking the shell of deceit. Jessica swayed where she stood, visibly shaken. Coleman's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. I didn't feel triumph. Looking at her, I saw not an enemy, but a woman consumed by the very fire she thought would destroy me. As the session ended, Franklin patted my shoulder. It's over, Arthur. She just destroyed herself. I gave a faint nod. No, Frank, it's just beginning. She won't stop. Not until there's nothing left. Outside, Jessica stood alone at the courthouse steps. The wind whipped through her hair, scattering it across her face. As I walked past, I said nothing. But for a brief second, our eyes met, and for the first time I saw fear in hers. On the drive home, Michael gripped the steering wheel tight, his voice low. I can't believe someone could be that cruel. Sometimes, son, I said quietly, cruelty doesn't come from hate. It comes from fear. Fear of losing control. The late afternoon light fell across his face, and for the first time in months, I saw him smile. Small, but real. I knew this legal battle was a victory, but only for now. Jessica would come back with new tactics, new weapons, and I, the father she tried to erase, would be ready to stand, no matter how long the war lasted. The victory in court lasted only 2 weeks. Then the internet woke up, and this time it wasn't on my side. One morning as I was making coffee, Michael burst in clutching his phone, his face white. Dad, you need to see this. His screen was filled with a post that had gone viral. Elderly fraudster posing as biological father to seize son's assets. Dallas in outrage. Beneath it, a crudely captioned photo of Michael and me, taken from a distance, the headline cruelly framed. The foster father who cashed in on trust, hired lawyers to betray his daughter-in-law. Thousands of comments poured in. Disgusting. Old men these days, what tricks? If he's not blood, he has no right. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped my coffee. Everything I'd built, my honor, my decades as a father, twisted and shredded by a few anonymous lines on a screen. Michael hurled his phone onto the table in fury. Jessica did this. I know she did. I breathed slow and forced myself to keep calm. You can't lash out. That's exactly what she wants. She's pushing this into the light of public opinion, where lies shout louder than truth. Before the sentence left my lips, the landline rang. A woman's voice, courteous but distant, came through. Mr. Hayes, this is the Daily Star newsroom. We'd like to interview you about the lawsuit with your daughter-in-law. Any comments on the alleged paternal fraud? I gave a dry, tired laugh. If you want the truth, come to my house. If you only want clicks, I won't be part of it. I hung up, but my heart still thudded. The storm of public opinion had begun to roll in earnest. 3 days later, neighbors avoided my gaze. At the corner store, whispers followed me down the aisles. The delivery man no longer greeted me. He simply left the parcel on the stoop and walked away. I, Arthur Hayes, who'd tried to do right for 70 years, had been recast as a scheming old man. Michael tried to post a rebuttal online, but his messages were swamped, flagged, and taken down. Jessica fed the fire with more fabricated evidence, screenshots doctored to look like emails from me to lawyers about hiding assets, cut so cleverly that a casual reader wouldn't notice. She went on a local talk show, crocodile tears, and a trembling voice. I only want the truth. I love my husband, but how could I live knowing he'd been lied to his whole life? The audience clapped. The host nodded, sympathetic. Once again, the world rallied behind the one who knew how to cry on camera. That night I sat in front of the TV watching her face broadcast across living rooms, feeling like I was watching a perfectly staged criminal drama. Michael sat beside me, his knuckles white in my hand. They're destroying you, Dad. No, son. They're testing how strong your faith in me really is. I stood and looked out the window. Rain streaked down the glass, painting the wet street in gray. My face in the reflection was older, exhausted, but my eyes were still steady. Son, I said slowly, get ready. The truth won't rise from the muck on its own. We have to pull it out. I reached for the old address book and flipped to a name I hadn't dialed in over 10 years. Amelia Ross, a freelance reporter I once saved from a factory fire. She was the woman I'd dragged out of the smoke with my bare hands. If anyone could help me fight back through the noise and chaos, it would be her. 3 days after the call, Amelia Ross appeared at my door. She looked almost exactly as I remembered her 10 years ago. Small frame, sharp eyes, but now there was something new behind them, the quiet wisdom of someone who'd seen too many lies. Mr. Hayes, she said with a faint smile, the last time we met you were dragging me out of a burning warehouse. Looks like it's my turn to return the favor. I couldn't help but smile, my voice catching. You don't owe me a thing, Amelia. You just owe the truth a chance to be heard. She opened her laptop right there at the table. Screens lit up with charts, screenshots, fake accounts, and posts shared thousands of times. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, her eyes scanning line after line. I've analyzed this smear campaign, she said. Same accounts, same timing, same hashtags. Someone hired a ghost media firm to orchestrate the narrative. Who? I asked quietly. She hesitated. I'm not naming names yet, but the IP addresses trace back to the office of one person, Coleman, Jessica's attorney. I froze. So this whole thing was staged. Not just staged, Amelia said. Engineered, executed like a political operation, but they forgot one thing. The internet never truly deletes anything. It hides, but it doesn't forget, and I can trace it back. She looked up, her eyes blazing with conviction. But I need your permission to tell your story, completely. No lawyers, no press statements. Just your truth, as a father. I studied her face. This was the same woman who'd once exposed a state corruption scandal at the cost of her own career. If anyone could bring light back to this mess, it was her. Do it, I said finally. Tell the story, but don't destroy Jessica. Just remind people that a father's love doesn't need a DNA test. Amelia smiled softly and nodded. 3 days later, her article went live on the feature column, Real People, Real Truths. The title was simple, only 6 words. A father without blood, but with love. She told everything, my years in the factory, raising Michael alone after Martha's death, the lawsuit, the humiliation, no embellishment, no defense, just raw, unfiltered truth. She ended with a single line that pierced straight through the noise. If love depends on DNA, then the word family would have no meaning. Arthur Hayes is not a fraud. He is what too many have forgotten. Love is an action, not a certificate. The piece exploded. Thousands of comments poured in. This man is a real father. I cried reading this. The world needs more people like him. Jessica should be ashamed of herself. News outlets began to pick it up, but this time, the tone was different. A major TV network invited me and Amelia to appear on a special segment. I declined, but Amelia didn't. She went on air and unveiled the proof she'd found. A chain of anonymous wire transfers from Jessica's account to a shadow PR firm named Ecosphere Media. On live television, Amelia said, "This isn't just a family feud. It's an example of how a person's honor can be destroyed by manufactured outrage, and how one man refused to answer hate with hate." The studio went silent. Somewhere, behind a screen, Jessica was watching. I could almost see her face, the trembling lips, the shock, the first crack in her mask. That night, as I stepped onto the porch, the town felt different. Lights glowed warm in the rain. Then came a knock on the door. Two of my neighbors stood there holding a still warm pie. "Mr. Hayes," one of them said softly, "we believe you. They were wrong about you." I smiled, my throat tightening. Justice doesn't always come from the courts. Sometimes it comes quietly, from the hearts of strangers brave enough to believe in what's right. When Amelia's article spread across the internet, Jessica vanished from public view for nearly a week. I thought maybe she'd finally fallen silent, but people who live on lies don't know how to stop. They only know how to survive by creating new ones. On Saturday morning, the internet exploded again. A new account surfaced, posting a clipped video. Arthur Hayes admits in court he's not sure Michael is his biological son. The video was expertly edited, just one line taken out of context. My voice saying, "I have no proof, only you." But they'd added fake subtitles. "I'm not his real father." Within hours, the clip had 1 million views. The hashtag Arthur the Liar climbed straight to the top of trending topics. I watched the screen, scrolling through hundreds of hateful comments, mockery, disgust, condemnation, and my heart went cold. But this time, I wasn't alone. Amelia texted me that same morning. "Stay calm, Mr. Hayes. They're using copies. We have the original." 3 hours later, she published the full, unedited courtroom video, no cuts, no filters, alongside a detailed breakdown of how Jessica's media network had fabricated the fake clip. She also released new evidence, a payment trail from Jessica's account at Ecosphere Media to a smaller satellite company called Brightwave PR. Jessica's signature was on every transfer. The backlash was immediate. The internet flipped overnight. She even faked the footage. How far will she go? I owe that old man an apology. I called him a fraud last week. Now I feel sick. News outlets turned on her. Talk shows that once welcomed Jessica called, demanding a response to the disinformation scandal. She didn't answer. 2 days later, headlines broke. Ecosphere Media under federal investigation for paid misinformation campaigns. I sat at the same old cafe where I'd first met Franklin. The TV over the counter showed Jessica's photo with the caption, "Woman faces inquiry for fabricating media content." I didn't feel triumphant, not even relieved, just hollow. A woman who once had everything, a husband, respect, a life, now had only a name smeared across the same internet she had used as a weapon. Amelia walked in, placing the morning paper in front of me. "Looks like you did it, Arthur," she said softly. "Not just in court, but in people's hearts." I shook my head. "No, Amelia, I didn't win anything. I just took back what she tried to steal, the truth." She smiled gently. "Then you won the hardest fight there is." We sat in silence. Morning light spilled through the cafe window, catching the rising steam from my coffee cup. The past months replayed in my mind, the insults, the suspicion, the sleepless nights. All of it fading now, leaving behind something far greater than pride, the quiet peace that comes when your name is clean again. That evening, Michael came by. He set a newspaper on the table, the headline bold across the top, "Arthur Hayes, the father who stayed." "Dad," he said softly, "I've read this 10 times. They're right. You never left, even when the whole world did. I looked at my son and smiled faintly. I knew you'd come back, son. We embraced. No more words were needed. Somewhere else, on the nightly news, a short clip aired. Jessica, pale, exhausted, eyes hollow, hurried into a waiting car, avoiding the cameras. The world had stopped listening to her. I turned off the TV and looked out the window. The wind brushed through the trees, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth, and in that whispering breeze I could almost hear Martha's voice. You did it, Arthur. You kept the light alive. I nodded to the quiet night. Peace had finally come back to me, but deep inside I knew the final battle was still ahead. Round 4, the Court of Justice. The final hearing began on a still autumn morning. Dallas itself seemed to be holding its breath. Outside the courthouse, crowds of reporters and curious onlookers packed the steps, cameras flashing, microphones raised, voices murmuring. No one called me a fraud anymore. Now they called me something else. The father who never gave up. I stepped out of the car, Franklin by my side. Inside, Jessica was already seated at the defendant's table. Gray suit, pale face, and that same fragile arrogance she'd always worn like armor. Beside her sat Coleman, the once cocky young lawyer who now looked drained, his confidence worn thin. Before the session began, I caught Jessica's gaze for a brief second, and in that fleeting glance, I didn't see hatred. I saw fear, raw, desperate, animal fear. The judge's gavel struck. This court is now in session. We are here to hear the case of Mrs. Jessica Hayes, charged with falsifying legal documents, defamation, and deliberate dissemination of false information causing reputational damage. His voice echoed off the wooden panels of the courtroom. Coleman stood first, straightening his tie, forcing a veneer of calm. Your Honor, my client is not a criminal. She's a woman who acted out of love and concern for her husband. Everything she did was in pursuit of the truth. We will show that Mr. Arthur Hayes manipulated public sentiment and exploited media sympathy to his advantage. Franklin rose slowly, his presence calm but commanding. Your Honor, for the past year, my client has made no public statements, held no press conferences, and posted nothing on any platform. Meanwhile, the defendant signed 5 separate media contracts to destroy his reputation, and today I present every single one of them. He handed a thick folder to the clerk. All eyes turned to Jessica. Her hands trembled slightly, her face had gone ghost white. Then Franklin called his first witness. Michael Hayes, please take the stand. Michael walked to the front, composed in a dark suit, shoulders square. He wasn't the uncertain son I'd seen a year ago. Mr. Hayes, Franklin began, can you tell the court about your relationship with Arthur Hayes? Michael took a breath, steady but emotional. He's my father, not by paperwork, not by blood, but in every way that matters. A murmur rippled through the audience. The judge gave a small nod for him to continue. Did Mrs. Jessica Hayes do anything to make you doubt your father? Michael's voice caught slightly, but he didn't falter. She told me I'd been switched at birth. She showed me forged documents, fake photos, even hired someone to pose as a witness, and I believed her. I hurt my father because I trusted the wrong person. He paused, eyes glassy, turning toward me. I nodded softly. It was all right. But I've learned something, he said quietly. You can buy a signature. You can buy headlines. But you can't buy the memories a son has of the man who raised him. The courtroom fell utterly silent. Coleman broke the stillness, sneering slightly. Emotional statements don't count as evidence. Franklin's reply came calm and sharp. I agree, which is why we'll now show you the evidence. The screen flickered on. Amelia Ross appeared via live feed, summoned as an independent witness. Her voice was clear, resolute. I am the journalist who uncovered the series of payments from Mrs. Jessica Hayes to 2 PR firms explicitly labeled Public Campaign to Damage the Reputation of Arthur Hayes. All transactions were verified and bear Mrs. Hayes's original signature. Coleman jumped to his feet, objecting, but the judge cut him off. The evidence has already been authenticated. Proceed. The room seemed to hold its breath. Jessica's hands clenched together, trembling. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. The woman who once commanded the media now sat small, fragile, diminished, the echo of her own ambition. The judge called for a 15-minute recess. As we stepped out, Michael caught my hand. Dad, I said what I should have said a long time ago. I squeezed his shoulder gently. It's all right, son. What matters is you said it now, and you said it true. Outside the tall windows, the autumn sunlight spilled across the courthouse steps, warm and golden, like a promise. For the first time in a long time, I felt it. The end was near, and the truth was finally ready to stand on its own. When the recess ended, the air in the courtroom thickened again, heavy, electric. Everyone knew it. This was the turning point. The judge cleared his throat. Counsel for the defense, Mrs. Jessica Hayes, do you wish to address the court? Jessica rose slowly. Her hands trembled, but her voice tried to hold steady. I I only wanted to protect my husband. I thought Mr. Hayes was deceiving us. I found documents that didn't make sense. I believed he was hiding something. Coleman quickly stepped in, smoothing over her words. Your Honor, my client acted under emotional distress, driven by fear and love for her husband. Her actions, while misguided, came from devotion, not malice. Franklin remained still for a moment, watching them with quiet patience, like a man listening to a familiar old lie. Then he stood, adjusting his glasses. Your Honor, he began evenly, love does not grant anyone the right to destroy another person's reputation. And if Mrs. Hayes truly acted out of love, perhaps she can explain why she transferred $180,000 to two media firms labeled under Personal Image Rehabilitation Project. A ripple spread through the room. Jessica's face drained of color. That was a private investment, she stammered. Investment? Franklin tilted his head. Curious, because the accompanying email reads, We need the public to turn against him before the trial closes. This is a direct printout from Brightwave PR's server, complete with timestamp and verified digital signature. A low murmur erupted. Pens scribbled furiously as reporters exchanged glances. Jessica sank back into her seat, hands clenched tight, tears welling at the corners of her eyes. The judge turned toward her. Mrs. Hayes, do you acknowledge this email as your own? Jessica said nothing. Silence pressed in from every corner. Franklin didn't push. He knew. Sometimes silence was the loudest confession of all. Finally, she looked up, eyes glistening, voice breaking. Yes, I did it. But he isn't innocent. He hid things, from Michael, from everyone. Martha wasn't who she seemed. She once donated her eggs to another woman. I just wanted to expose the truth. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Franklin didn't even flinch. You're correct, he said softly. Martha Hayes did help a friend, a woman who couldn't have children. But she never lied, and she never switched her baby. I have here a letter written in that woman's own hand before she passed in 1995. He placed a yellowed envelope on the bench, his voice lowering with respect. If it weren't for Martha, the letter read, I would have lost hope. She bore her own child in tears, while I was left with only the courage she gave me. I recognized Martha's handwriting, gentle, unsteady, familiar. Franklin's voice softened further. Martha Hayes wasn't deceitful. She was kind, and she chose silence not out of guilt, but to protect her family, to make sure her son would never feel different. That silence was twisted into a weapon by someone who mistook control for love. Jessica began to cry openly now, her shoulders trembling. I couldn't stand it. He loved his father more than me. I was losing him. I did everything I could, just to make him look back at me again. Franklin shook his head gently. And that's the tragedy, Mrs. Hayes. Love built on fear always ends in destruction, never devotion. The courtroom was utterly still. Even the air seemed to pause. The judge watched Jessica for a long time, his expression no longer stern but weary, almost compassionate. Mrs. Hayes, he said quietly, is there anything else you wish to say before the court adjourns for verdict? Jessica wiped her face, whispering through her tears, I'm sorry. Not because I lost, but because I made a man stop believing in kindness. I don't deserve to be anyone's wife, or anyone's reason to hate. I looked at her then. There was no anger left in me, only sorrow, for the woman who had let love turn into a blade. Franklin gathered the documents and faced the judge. Your Honor, the evidence speaks for itself. All that remains now is justice. The judge nodded once, gravely. The court will reconvene tomorrow morning for sentencing. The gavel struck. Thud. As the crowd began to rise and shuffle out, I stayed still, staring up at the high ceiling, listening to the echo of footsteps fade down the hall. Tomorrow, I knew, the light would finally come through. The next morning, Dallas woke under a sky so clear it almost felt symbolic, as if the city itself wanted to breathe again. Sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows of the courthouse, spilling across the wooden benches and softening the solemn air inside. I sat in the front row, fingers clasped tight. Franklin leaned toward me and whispered, "Take a deep breath, Arthur. Today's your day." The judge entered and struck the gavel 3 times. The entire courtroom rose, the soft scrape of chairs echoing like a quiet tide. Jessica sat motionless at the defense table. Her face was pale, hollow, stripped of the pride and polish she once wore so easily. There was no makeup, no false smile, only the shell of a woman who'd finally run out of lies. The judge's voice filled the room, steady and deliberate. After reviewing all evidence, testimony, and forensic findings, this court finds Mrs. Jessica Hayes guilty of falsifying legal documents, defamation, and intentional infliction of reputational harm. A pause, and then the verdict. Sentence: 5 years probation, 1 year of community service, and financial restitution, $150,000, to Mr. Arthur Hayes for damages and defamation. Thud. The gavel came down like the closing of a chapter. Jessica didn't move. One tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. I watched her, and for the first time I felt no anger, only a strange, aching relief. After everything, the humiliation, the sleepless nights, the cruel whispers, I was still standing, and for the first time in a long time I'd heard the word I'd been fighting for: justice. The judge turned toward me. "Mr. Hayes, this court recognizes that you did not only defend your own name, but stood for every father ever misunderstood. Your composure and decency have been an example to us all." I rose, my knees unsteady, but my voice clear. "Your Honor, I only did what any father would do: protect the love he spent a lifetime building." A wave of applause broke out from the gallery. Some reporters even wiped their eyes. At the back of the room, I saw Amelia smiling quietly, camera in hand, capturing the moment. An old man with silver hair and trembling hands, but eyes burning with light. Michael walked up to me, tears streaming down his face. "Dad, I don't deserve you." I pulled him into an embrace. "No, son. I never needed you to deserve me. I just needed you to come home." We stood there for a long time, father and son, holding on as the courtroom buzzed around us. Through the tall windows, sunlight broke over us, warm and golden, and for an instant I could almost feel Martha there too, smiling softly from somewhere unseen. Franklin came over, his voice trembling with quiet pride. "Arthur, you did it. You didn't just win a case, you won people's hearts." I smiled faintly, still staring at the courtroom doors. "No, Frank, I didn't win. I just proved that truth never goes out of style." Then came the sound of footsteps behind me. Jessica was being escorted down the hall. As she passed, she stopped for a moment. Her tired eyes met mine, and she spoke barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry." I nodded. "I know, and I forgive you. But learn this: love can't be born from fear." She looked away, tears glinting in her lashes, then walked on. The heavy doors closed behind her, but in my heart, another door quietly opened. When I stepped outside, the autumn wind hit my face, crisp and full of life. Reporters swarmed the steps, cameras flashing. Amelia was there among them, but she didn't ask for quotes. She just smiled knowingly. One young journalist called out, "Mr. Hayes, do you have anything you'd like to say to the public?" I stopped, looked straight into the cameras, and said, "Sometimes we spend our lives trying to prove who's right or wrong, and we forget what truly matters: who stayed. I may not be Michael's biological father, maybe that's true, but I am the man who never walked away. And for me, that's enough." The wind carried my words down the courthouse steps. That afternoon, a new hashtag began spreading across social media. #the father who stayed. I smiled as I walked away. Justice isn't only written in verdicts, it's written in the hearts of those who choose to believe again. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. Not because I'd been declared innocent, but because I'd finally found myself again. After the trial, Dallas slipped back into its usual rhythm, but not for Jessica Hayes. The woman who once strutted across red carpets, who once commanded boardrooms with the confidence of a queen, was no longer welcome in any of them. News of the verdict spread like wildfire. The media no longer called her the brave wife seeking truth. Now she had a new title, the woman behind the century's greatest media hoax. That same night, her company released a statement. Due to severe ethical violations and actions that have irreparably damaged the company's reputation, Jessica Hayes is hereby terminated effective immediately. Within a week, Jessica lost everything, her job, her friends, and the voice that once made people tremble. Her phone rang non-stop, not from friends but from reporters eager to capture the face of the woman who fell from grace. She turned it off. She disappeared. The luxury apartment she once flaunted like a trophy now felt cold, hollow, the kind of silence that hums in your ears. The walls reflected her fatigue in pale yellow light, the same sickly hue as her reflection in the mirror. The tabloids didn't let go. Every morning brought a new headline: Jessica Hayes, from modern icon to symbol of deceit. The price of ambition, when love turns into manipulation. People who once crowded her parties now avoided her name like a curse. A few sent polite texts. "Stay strong, Jess," before vanishing for good. At the grocery store, the cashier avoided eye contact. Two women whispered by the fruit aisle. "That's her, the one who tried to ruin her father-in-law." Jessica turned away, dark glasses hiding her eyes. For the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to be looked at like a criminal. Michael moved out of their apartment the night of the verdict. He didn't argue, didn't cry, just left a note on the kitchen counter. "I once believed love could save you, but now I see. You don't want love, you want control, and I can't give you that." She read it until the paper tore from her hands, trembling. The apartment now echoed with the hum of the refrigerator and the silence of overturned wedding photos. At night, she dreamed of the courtroom. The judge's voice became Arthur's, echoing through the void. "Do you know what the cruelest thing is, Jessica? It's not the lie. It's killing someone's faith in goodness." She woke drenched in sweat, gasping for air. Sitting by the window, she stared out at the glittering skyline. Part of her wanted to call Michael. The other part feared his silence more than his anger. For someone who had built her life around noise, the flash of cameras, the chatter of power, silence had become her harshest sentence. 10 days after the verdict, an email arrived from the court. Her community service had been approved, 1 year of public labor at a homeless outreach center. She stared at the word approved until it blurred. From a woman who once gave orders to dozens of employees, she would now scrub tables, serve meals, and sweep floors. On her first day, she put on the gray volunteer uniform. The smell of disinfectant filled the air. An elderly woman with silver hair and a kind smile greeted her. "First day?" the old woman asked warmly. Jessica nodded, her voice rough. "Yes, my first." The woman pointed toward a framed black and white photo on the wall, an image of an older man handing food to a homeless child. Below it, a plaque read, "Arthur Hayes, founder of the Real Fathers Foundation, 2025. Jessica froze. Her breath caught. The name hit her like a wave of ice. Arthur, the man she'd tried to destroy, was the founder of the very center where she now had to serve. The old woman smiled softly. "He was a good man, you know. I used to be one of the people he helped. He always said, 'Everyone deserves a second chance, even those who've hurt us.'" Jessica swallowed hard. Her throat ached. And for the first time, her tears fell, not from rage, not from defeat, but from the crushing realization of what she'd truly lost, the kindness of another human heart. The first month of community service was the longest month of Jessica's life. Every morning at 6, she reported to the Real Fathers Center, wearing a gray volunteer uniform with a number tag instead of a name. Her duties were simple but relentless: serve meals to the homeless, wipe down tables, collect trash. No one called her Mrs. Hayes anymore. There were no fake smiles from coworkers, no phone ringing with business deals or invitations. Only the sharp smell of disinfectant, the shuffle of rubber sandals, and the steady clinking of spoons against tin trays. Jessica kept her head down, working quietly, avoiding everyone's eyes. A few people recognized her from the news, but they said nothing, and somehow that silence cut deeper than any insult could. Every time she walked past Arthur's framed photo on the wall, she bowed her head. At first out of shame, then out of something heavier. One Saturday afternoon, the center held a charity event for underprivileged children. Jessica was assigned to arrange tables and pastries. Cheerful music filled the courtyard. Children's laughter echoed through the air. And then she saw him, Michael. He wore a white shirt with a volunteer badge that read Special Guest. He was handing out lunch boxes, smiling, that same gentle smile she hadn't seen in so long, the smile she once tried to control, to own. Now it was free, peaceful, beautiful. She froze. Her heart hammered against her ribs. How long had it been since she'd seen him like this? She turned to walk away, but he'd already seen her. Their eyes met. There was no anger in his, no bitterness, just a quiet calm, the look of someone who had finally let go. "Hi, Jessica," he said softly. Her voice wavered. "I didn't expect to see you here. I'm helping with my father's foundation," he said. "Real fathers just passed 2,000 meals this year. Dad always said everyone deserves a second chance." The words hit her like a weight pressing against her chest. She looked down, unable to meet his eyes. "Are you doing okay?" she asked quietly. "I'm good," he replied, smiling faintly. "Better than ever, actually. Peaceful." He paused. "What about you?" Jessica took a long breath. "I'm learning how to be ordinary." Michael nodded, his gaze drifting toward the children laughing in the sun. "You know," he said, "I used to think my father was too hard on me, too strict. But now I get it. He was teaching me something, that forgiveness doesn't make you weak, it sets you free." Then he turned to her again. "I forgive you, Jessica, not because you deserve it, but because I don't want to carry the hate anymore." The words sliced gently but deeply. Jessica bit her lip as tears slid down her gray sleeve. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she whispered. I just want you to be happy." He nodded. "I already am." Michael walked away, his figure disappearing into the sunlight, carrying trays of cookies to the children. Jessica stood still, watching him go. She wanted to call out, to say something, anything, but she knew. No words could fix what had already been broken. When the event ended, she stayed behind to clean up. The last rays of sun fell on Arthur's portrait, illuminating his face with a soft golden glow. The elderly woman in charge came up beside her, resting a gentle hand on her shoulder. "See that?" she said. "Even the man you once hurt believed you deserved a chance to start over. That's real kindness." Jessica nodded slowly, staring at her hands. The same hands that once signed contracts, pushed money, destroyed reputations, now trembling as they wiped crumbs from a table. For the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar. Peace, mixed with guilt. That night, back in her apartment, she opened her old laptop. The folder labeled Work was still there, filled with PR plans, media contracts, and old manipulative email threads. One by one, she deleted them all. No hesitation, no looking back. When the screen finally flashed, "Recycle bin is empty," tears rolled down her cheeks. Not the tears of failure, but the tears of someone, finally, learning how to repent. On Jessica's final night working at the Real Father Center, a light drizzle blanketed Dallas. Raindrops clung to the windows like memories refusing to fade. She sat alone in the small kitchen, the last light flickering weakly above her. The elderly supervisor had gone home hours ago. Only the ticking of the clock and the smell of cold coffee kept her company. On the wall, Arthur's portrait still hung in its usual place. Jessica stared at it for a long time and whispered, "You won, Arthur, but not in court, in my heart." The words broke softly in the silence, as if they'd been waiting years to be said. She remembered the first time she met him, the calm warmth in his eyes, the gentle voice, the way he'd called her Jessica, my daughter-in-law, with real affection. She had betrayed that kindness, and now she was paying for it, not with prison, but with solitude. That night she dreamed. In her dream, she stood in a vast golden field. The wind was soft, the air still. Arthur walked toward her, not aged, not weary, just serene, peaceful. "Did you come to condemn me?" she asked. He smiled. "No, Jessica. I came because you finally understand." Understand what? That love isn't about holding on, it's about letting go. She woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding. Rain still whispered against the glass. Beside her was a blank sheet of paper and a pen. Jessica picked it up and began to write, each line trembling like a confession released after years in chains. Arthur, I don't ask for your forgiveness. I only want you to know what I did didn't just destroy you, it destroyed me. I lost everything trying to prove I was right, while all you ever wanted was trust. Thank you for letting me serve at your center. Every tray I washed, every table I wiped, it felt like I was cleaning a small piece of my own soul. If there's another life after this one, I hope I'm brave enough to live as you did, to choose love over victory. Goodbye, Jessica. She folded the letter and placed it in the donation box beneath Arthur's photograph. When the supervisor arrived the next morning, Jessica was gone. Only her gray uniform remained, neatly folded on the table, and the letter inside the box. A week later, at a small farmhouse on the outskirts of Dallas, Arthur was pouring tea when a letter arrived. It bore his name in handwriting he hadn't seen since the trial. Inside was Jessica's note, and a photo. Jessica stood in front of the real father's center, smiling. A tired, honest smile. On the back she'd written, I'm leaving Dallas. Thank you for giving me a second chance. Arthur sat quietly for a long time. Michael came in and noticed the letter. What did she say, Dad? Arthur's voice was soft. She said she's sorry, and thank you. They sat together, watching the golden fields sway beyond the window. Arthur spoke, his tone half a whisper. People only truly change when they've hurt deeply enough. But if a lost soul can bow her head and seek forgiveness, then no one deserves to be forgotten forever. Michael nodded slowly. Dad, I think Mom would forgive her too. Arthur smiled, eyes glistening as he looked up at the clear blue sky. Martha always forgave people before they even asked. Maybe that's why the world still has a bit of kindness left in it. Months later, quiet rumors began to spread among local volunteers. In a small town in North Texas, a woman named Jessie had opened a modest cafe for day laborers and the homeless. Every morning, she brewed coffee for the early risers, gave pastries to children on the street, and never accepted extra tips. On the cafe wall hung just one photograph, an old picture of a silver-haired man hugging a child, with a plaque underneath that read, Everyone deserves a second chance. No one knew that Jessie was Jessica Hayes. She chose to live quietly now, humbly, kindly, as her way of making amends. And every time she looked at that photo, she smiled. A smile she had never known before, the smile of someone who had finally found her soul again. Back in Dallas, Arthur received a copy of that same photo in the mail. He placed it gently on Martha's altar and lit an incense stick. You see, Martha, she finally understands. The smoke rose, curling into the soft morning light, while outside, children's laughter echoed in the courtyard of the Real Father Center, a song of hope, of grace, of new beginnings. Arthur closed his eyes and smiled. For the first time in years, his heart felt completely at peace, because the true punishment of a villain isn't the sentence they serve, but the moment they finally understand the worth of truth. And for Arthur, that understanding was his final victory, the victory of a father who chose to love instead of hate. 3 years after leaving Dallas, Jessica, or rather Jessie, had built a quiet life in a riverside town called Marlow Creek. Her cafe, Second Cup, sat on a street corner where the air always smelled of baked bread and freshly roasted coffee. The townspeople adored her, though none knew her past. To them, Jessie was a gentle woman with kind hands, sad eyes, and a talent for making the best espresso in South Texas. She no longer read the news. She no longer checked social media. Life had become simple, steady, peaceful, at least on the surface. But deep inside, a shadow still lingered. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, she dreamed of the courtroom. No judge, no Franklin, no crowd, just Arthur, sitting in the front row, looking at her with those same kind, weary eyes. Are you still afraid of me, Jessica? No, I'm afraid of myself. Then forgive yourself, the way I forgave you. Each time she woke up shaking, her heart pounding, her body damp with sweat. She'd walk out onto the porch, stare at the empty sky, and whisper to no one, "What does it mean to forgive yourself? Does it mean forgetting? Or living better so the past can rest?" One spring morning, the Real Fathers Foundation announced a mobile outreach campaign, bringing meals to small, struggling towns. When the truck rolled into Marlow Creek, Jesse froze. The familiar logo was painted across its side, along with a picture of Arthur Hayes, the same photo that once hung on the wall of the Dallas Center. Beneath it read, "Real Fathers, because everyone deserves to be loved like a child." She stood motionless among the crowd, her hands trembling in her apron pockets. Part of her wanted to flee. Part of her wanted to walk closer. And then a voice carried over the microphone, warm, steady, unmistakable. "Good morning, everyone. We're from the Real Fathers Foundation. These meals are part of a program started by Mr. Arthur Hayes, our founder." Jessica's heart nearly stopped. The speaker was Michael. Time had softened him. Streaks of gray in his hair, gentleness in his eyes that reminded her of Arthur. He didn't see her in the crowd. She took a step back, hiding behind a group of townsfolk watching as he spoke. He told them about the foundation, about the children it helped, and about his father's philosophy. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about who deserves it, it's the only way to keep your heart from rotting. Tears blurred Jessica's vision. Every word cut deep, words she once mocked as weakness, now the only truth keeping her alive. When the event ended, she waited until the crowd dispersed. Then quietly she approached the donation table. A small guest book lay open for people to leave notes of thanks. Her hand trembled as she picked up the pen. "Thank you. To the man who taught me that kindness can outlive memory. If you were still here, I'd want to meet you once more just to say thank you. For real this time." She closed the book quickly and slipped away. No one noticed her go. But that night, as Michael was reviewing the pages, his eyes caught a familiar tilt in one line of handwriting. He whispered under his breath, "Jesse." Weeks later, Jessica received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a photo of Arthur standing beside a riverbank, smiling faintly. On the back, written in his handwriting, "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Don't cry. Live kindly, because only by doing good can you truly be forgiven." It was enclosed with a flyer announcing memorial donations for the foundation. Arthur Hayes had passed away from a mild stroke. Jessica sank into her chair, the letter trembling in her hands. The tears came fast, raw, uncontrollable, the kind of sobs that rise not from sadness alone, but from the unbearable realization that you've lost the one person who still believed you could change. That night, she walked to the riverbank under a sky swept clean by rain. Wind tugged at her hair. She looked up and whispered, "You're gone now, but what you taught me will stay forever." She knelt and set a white flower afloat on the dark water. It drifted away slowly, like a late apology carried downstream. The next morning, townspeople noticed Second Cup opened earlier than usual. A new wooden sign hung outside the door. "If you can't afford coffee, take one anyway. Everyone deserves a new beginning." No one asked why, but those who met Jessie's eyes that day said she looked lighter, as if a burden had finally lifted. She smiled softly when she heard them say it, because they were right. After years of punishment, silence, and regret, she had finally begun to forgive herself. The years that followed passed gently for Jessica, or Jessie, as everyone in Marlow Creek now called her. Her little cafe had become a haven for everyone who had nowhere else to go. Day laborers, students, drifters looking for a quiet seat and a bit of warmth. Every morning she still woke at 5, ground the beans, opened the doors, and set the same wooden sign outside. "If today you have nothing, I still have a cup of coffee for you." No one in town knew that the gray-haired woman behind the counter had once stood before a judge, that she had once been the center of a national scandal. All they saw was her soft smile, her calm voice, and the quiet kindness that filled the little shop like morning light. But in the small room behind the cafe, on an old wooden table, sat a rusted metal box. Every evening at dusk, Jessica would sit there, open her notebook, and write letters she would never send. Letters addressed to Arthur Hayes. "Arthur, a boy came in today and told me I make the best coffee in town." I smiled. I've learned to smile, not to hide, not to prove anything, but because my heart finally feels at peace. Did you know, every time I help someone, I see a little of you in their eyes. Maybe you really did forgive me. Because if you hadn't, how could I live this lightly? She would fold the page, slip it into the box, and close it, as if mailing it straight to her own conscience. Over the years, the box grew full. She never burned the letters, never destroyed them. They stayed, quiet witnesses to a redemption that didn't need an audience, only sincerity. Every month she sent a small donation to real fathers. She never signed her name. In the donor list, there was only one entry: a friend who learned to love. Michael, who now managed the foundation, noticed that name every time. He always smiled when he saw it. He didn't need to know who it was. His father had taught him, when someone learns how to love, they already belong to the light. When Jessica turned 60, the doctor told her she was in the final stage of heart failure. The news came softly, like a breeze. No shock, no tears. She simply nodded and went back to her work, still grinding beans, still pouring coffee. That night she opened the old box and took out every letter she had ever written. She stacked them neatly, tied them with a thin ribbon, and placed them in a large envelope. On the front she wrote one final line: "For the Real Father's Foundation." So one day, if someone reads these, they'll know that even those who once lost their way can find it again, if they discover love. She mailed it the next morning, then went home and closed the cafe early for the first time in years. All night she sat by the window watching the rain. No phone calls, no knocks on the door, only the faint scent of coffee and the steady rhythm of a heart slowing to rest. She dreamed one last time. Jessica stood in a vast golden field under a cloudless sky. The wind was soft, the sunlight warm. Two figures approached her: a silver-haired man with kind eyes, and beside him a woman in a simple white dress. Arthur and Martha. Tears filled Jessica's eyes. "I don't belong here," she whispered. Arthur smiled, his voice as calm and deep as she remembered. "No one belongs or doesn't belong, Jessica. Anyone who's walked far enough through darkness will eventually find the light." Martha placed a hand on her shoulder, her voice gentle as the wind. "We forgive you. Not because you said sorry, but because you finally understood what love means." Jessica broke down, trembling. "I hurt everyone. I destroyed him. I destroyed myself." Arthur shook his head softly. "And then you rebuilt, one cup of coffee at a time, one small kindness after another. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's learning to live without hatred." The field grew brighter. A faint aroma of coffee drifted through the air. Arthur took Martha's hand, then reached out his other hand to Jessica. "Come on, my daughter. There are no courts here, no verdicts, only people who have learned to love." Jessica took his hand. Light surrounded them. She smiled, a smile free of guilt, free of fear, free at last. The next morning, the people of Marlow Creek found the second cup already open. The lights were still on, but Jessie sat slumped over the table, a gentle smile on her lips. On the counter stood a steaming cup of coffee and a handwritten note. "If anyone comes in, tell them this: no one is beyond redemption. Love, before it's too late." 2 weeks later, Michael received her final package. He read every line through blurred eyes. "Dad." She finally understood, he whispered, looking up toward the sky. And somewhere beyond the clouds, in a field bathed in eternal sunlight, Arthur, Martha, and Jessica walked side by side. No more guilt, no more fear, only forgiveness. A year after Arthur's passing, the Real Fathers Foundation had grown into a movement spreading across America. What began as a small center in Dallas was now a network of hundreds of volunteers across the country, all carrying the flame Arthur left behind, helping fatherless children, lonely men, and broken families rediscover the love they thought they'd lost forever. Michael had taken his father's place as executive director of the foundation, but at every meeting, every public event, he always said the same thing: "I'm not replacing my father. I'm simply continuing what he started, teaching the world that being a dad doesn't require DNA, only a genuine heart." On his desk sat an old photo, Arthur holding him as a 5-year-old, with Martha smiling behind them. Next to it was another picture, Jessica, taken inside her Second Cup Cafe, sent to the foundation by the people of Marlow Creek. Beneath it, a handwritten line read, "She found peace." Each time Michael looked at those photos, his heart grew still. He knew then that Arthur's greatest legacy wasn't the foundation itself. It was the circle of forgiveness he left behind. One cold winter morning, Michael visited the original Dallas Center, the place where it all began. The photo of Arthur still hung on the wall, the faint scent of mint tea lingering in the air. Around a long wooden table sat a group of men, some ex-convicts, some recovering addicts, some fathers once abandoned by their families, sharing pieces of their lives. A middle-aged man stood up, his voice trembling. I once beat my son so badly that he ran away. Then a real father's volunteer found me and said, being a father doesn't mean being right, it means staying. Yesterday my son came home. He hugged me and said, I forgive you. I've never cried like that in my life. The room erupted in applause. Michael smiled, eyes glistening. He stood, speaking with quiet warmth. My father once said, a man only truly becomes a man when he can apologize to his own child. And today I see him, in every one of you. He paused, then continued, his voice softer now. My father taught me that sometimes what breaks us is exactly where the light gets in. He lost his wife, he lost his name, but he gained something far greater, compassion. The room fell silent. Some bowed their heads, others reached for each other's hands. In that stillness, Michael could almost feel Arthur standing there, calm, proud, smiling as he once did. When the meeting ended, Michael stepped outside. Children were playing in the courtyard, their laughter echoing under the pale winter sun. A small girl ran up and handed him a handmade card. Thank you, mister. I have a new dad now. On the cover was a simple drawing, an old man with silver hair holding a little girl in his arms. Underneath, written in clumsy letters, Mr. Arthur. Michael lowered his head, and a tear rolled down his cheek. His father might have left this world, but he was still here, living quietly in every heart that had learned how to love. 2 years later, the name Real Fathers had spread to 23 states. Each branch carried its own story, a small miracle born from the seed Arthur Hayes once planted. Michael wasn't just an administrator anymore. He had become the heart of the movement. He traveled everywhere, from correctional facilities to homeless shelters, from big cities to quiet towns where sometimes a single hug could save a child. Wherever he went, people spoke of Arthur Hayes, not as some legend, but as a father who still seemed to walk among them. And the farther Michael traveled, the more he realized his father had never truly left this world. That summer, during an outreach trip, Michael and his volunteer team arrived at a small riverside town, Marlow Creek. An elderly woman came to greet them, holding a faded envelope, her voice trembling. You're Michael Hayes, aren't you? I was a friend of Jesse. Michael froze for a moment. That name, even after all these years, stirred something deep in him, a mix of sorrow and warmth. The woman handed him the envelope. She asked me to keep this. Said when real fathers came back, it should go straight to you. Michael opened it carefully. Inside was a small card, written in the familiar slant of Jesse's handwriting. Michael, if you're reading this, it means your father has found his rest, and you're carrying on what he began. Don't ever think you're alone. Somewhere, someone is still praying for you, and for every child who finds their father again in this world. Thank you for forgiving. Thank you for keeping your father from becoming just a memory, but a legacy. Enclosed is the savings book from Second Cup. Use it to open another Real Father's Center. Name it the Second Chance. It's the last gift from a woman who once lost everything and learned how to love again. Jesse. Michael stared at the small savings booklet. The amount wasn't large, but every dollar had come from Jesse's little cafe. A quiet wave of emotion rose in him, not joy, but a deep, humbled gratitude. He looked up at the sky. The clouds were breaking apart, and soft sunlight spilled over the river. Dad, he whispered. She did it. She found the light. 3 months later, in Marlow Creek, the new center, Real Fathers, the Second Chance, officially opened. 2 names were carved on the signboard, Arthur Hayes, Jesse, Jessica Hayes. On opening day, hundreds of townspeople came to celebrate. Michael stepped onto the stage and read Jesse's letter aloud. When he reached the final line, Love before it's too late, his voice caught, and the room fell utterly silent. Then a small boy raised his hand. Mr. Michael, are Mr. Arthur and Miss Jessie still alive? Michael knelt beside him, smiling gently. No, son, but they're still here, in all of our hearts. Applause filled the hall like a wave, and in that moment Michael felt it. his father standing right behind him, a steady hand resting on his shoulder, warm and sure. Arthur didn't speak. He didn't need to. Michael understood. Arthur's legacy had been passed on, through the very woman who had once caused him the deepest pain. The circle of forgiveness was complete. That afternoon, as the opening ceremony ended, golden sunlight spilled across the glass walls of the Second Chance Center. One by one, the crowd drifted away until only Michael remained, standing alone in the quiet hall. He walked slowly toward the memorial plaque at the center of the lobby, where two names were engraved, names he knew by heart: Arthur Hayes, Jesse Hayes. Beneath them was Arthur's quote, one Michael had chosen himself: "A real father isn't the one who gives you life, he's the one who teaches you how to love." Michael sat on a wooden bench, looking out through the window at the children playing in the yard. A gentle breeze stirred the grass, carrying with it the faint scent of coffee, like a whisper from second cup. He closed his eyes and began to speak softly, as if to himself, or to the two souls he knew were still watching from somewhere beyond. "I used to think justice was about courts, verdicts, and victories, but now I know real justice is when the heart finally finds peace. Dad, you taught me that truth never fears the light, and she, the woman who once hurt you, ended up carrying your legacy forward. Maybe that's what a miracle really is. I understand now why you never sought revenge, because revenge spreads the wound, but forgiveness heals it." He paused, his eyes lingering on the framed photo of Arthur and Jesse hanging side by side. "They say family is about blood. But no, Dad. Family is where hearts choose to stay, even when they don't share the same DNA." A tear slid down his cheek, catching the sunlight. He whispered again, voice trembling, but full of conviction. "I never said this while you were alive, but I want you to know now. I'm proud to be your son, Arthur Hayes, the man who taught me that love never needs proof, only the courage to give it." Michael rose and stepped outside. On the steps of the center, children were singing, holding hands in a circle. A little girl looked up at him and asked, "Mr. Michael, do you have a family?" He smiled. "Of course I do. My family is everyone who knows how to love and respect one another, just like you." The children laughed, their voices rising into the soft afternoon air. The light bathed Michael's face in a warm glow, the light of continuity, of hope, of faith that even the lost can find their way home if love still guides them. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "Dad, Jesse, everything's peaceful now." He placed a hand over his heart, where their legacy still lived, steady and alive. Family isn't defined by blood, it's built on respect and love. Arthur may be gone, but his love endures. In every hand that chooses forgiveness, in every heart brave enough to make things right, and in everyone still learning to love without judgment. If you've listening this far, pause for just a moment. Think of the person you once misunderstood, hurt, or turned away from. Maybe what they need isn't an apology, but understanding. Because sometimes forgiving someone else is how you finally save yourself. Follow the next chapter of our journey. The stories of Arthur, Michael, and Jesse are only the beginning. Out there, countless others are still waiting to be loved again, and the next story will be one you won't forget.